Chairman, and for holding today's markup. I think this is something that is a continuation of our previous hearing. I think it's going to be a lot of discussion today, a lot of hopeful amendments. There's going to be a lot of discussion on what actually works and what actually is simply for show. And we're going to continue to hopefully have a meaningful discussion in this process. We've discussed the fact that many of the tragedies of mass violence are punctuated by missed opportunities for law enforcement to respond to mental illness or known threats. I'm sad the bill before us represents another missed opportunity to prevent this violence in our communities. It's disturbing that in a clamor to do something to combat mass violence, you and your colleagues managed to craft a bill that does exactly nothing. In the last roughly 2 years, this committee has produced 3 laws addressing factors fueling gun violence. President Obama signed one of them. Evidence tells us, though, that the H.R. 8 solves nothing. My microphone, is it echoing back? Maybe it's just me. I don't know. It's my Georgia twang. That's probably what it is. All right, we're fine. Thank you for whoever turned it down. I appreciate it. Evidence tells us that H.R. 8 will solve nothing. The National Institute of Justice, the research and evaluation arm of the Justice Department that informs criminal justice decision-making, concluded in 2013 that universal background checks are ineffective without a gun registry. So what did my Democrat friends do with the NIJ's conclusion? They ignored it. In fact, they wrote a bill that explicitly prohibits creating a registry. Let me be clear, Mr. Chairman. In no way am I suggesting there should be a registry. That's a profound intrusion on the rights of millions of Americans, but this shows our Democrat friends are perpetrating a fraud on the activists who support them. They're peddling false hope to both activists and victims of violence. When we pointed out last week at the H.R. 8 hearing was ineffective, Democrats had to scramble for new talking points. And fortunately, Chief Acevedo came to their rescue. He asked if the bill would save just one life, isn't it worth it? Well, we don't know if this bill will save any lives, but we do know from NIJ determining it would be ineffective. And we all know criminals don't obey laws, and as a result, this bill may actually cost us lives as we go forward. Not only is the bill ineffective according to the Obama DOJ, its policy is so irresponsible that it will turn law-abiding citizens into criminals with a stroke of a pen. Consider the domestic violence victim who has restraining order against her abuser but still lives in fear of him. She'd like a firearm to protect herself but can't afford one because, in their wisdom, the chairman and colleagues have prohibited the Attorney General from capping the cost of the NICS check. If you happen to live here in Washington, D.C., that cost is $125. For many people, that means choosing between putting food on the table or protecting themselves from dangerous people. So this victim's friend offers to loan her a firearm. As a law-abiding citizen under H.R. 8, this victim would have to go to her nearest federal firearms licensee for a background check. Otherwise, she'll be a criminal. Because she lives in North Dakota, the nearest FFL is 4 hours away while her abuser lives just down the road. There aren't choices. These aren't choices people, and particularly victims, should be forced to make. Yet that's the choice our Democrat colleagues will be forcing upon numerous victims like the young lady Savannah we heard from last week. They'd rather leave people vulnerable to victimization than write a law that could possibly work. But that's only the beginning of the fatal flaws in H.R. 8. If a police officer sells his rifle to a fellow officer without running to the FFL first for a background check, they'd both be criminals. Likewise, if a stepsister gives a firearm to her stepbrother without running to a local FFL first, they would be criminals. There are countless lawful firearm transfers occurring on a regular basis between law-abiding citizens, none of which lead to crime. The absurd bill ignores the fact and turns all these innocent people into criminals. But this bill refuses to take up the most logical step in combating gun violence, namely preventing criminals from acquiring firearms. Criminals primarily get their firearms via theft and straw purchases, but those already illegal. So we don't need more restrictive laws, we need more enforcement. What's more, research shows background checks do nothing to impact homicide or suicide death. At least one scholarly article this month concluded California's comprehensive background check system policies were not associated with the changes in firearm suicide or homicide. Sadly, the tragedy of San Bernardino and Thousand Oaks make this obvious. This bill would do nothing to address what my colleagues would agree are the key dimensions of mass violence, mental illness, and a culture desensitized to violence. As a result, H.R. 8 wouldn't have prevented Parkland, Sandy Hook, Orlando, Aurora, or any other the Greece that my friends on the Democratic side have talked about, except for exploiting them. Mr. Chairman, last week we talked about this in depth. We talked about how this is going to go about. It is nothing short of a misnomer to say this would at first correct the ills that is being tried here. I commend the effort, The effort, though, however, comes up short. And despite its title, this bill is anything really from bipartisan. There are bipartisan solutions on the table, but this isn't one of them. And I would urge my colleagues to oppose this misguided legislation. And with that, I yield back.